The wedding invitation said the Carter Miller wedding, written in gold letters that shined like a promise. For weeks, Emily Carter told herself that no matter how strange things had felt lately, this day would bring everything back to normal. After all, it was her little sister's wedding. Family always found its way back on days like this, or so Emily believed. The moment Emily stepped into the Grand Hotel ballroom in Boston, something felt wrong. The room was alive with music, laughter, and the soft clinking of glasses. White roses covered every table. Crystal lights reflected off polished floors. Couples smiled at each other, hands linked, moving together like they belonged exactly where they stood. Emily paused, just inside the doorway, adjusting the strap of her navy blue dress, waiting for anyone to notice her. No one did. An usher approached, flipping through a list with quick fingers. "Emily Carter," he asked politely. "Yes," she replied, smiling with relief. He frowned for just a second, then pointed toward the far corner of the room. "Seat is over there." Emily followed his gesture, expecting to see a family table, maybe one near the stage. Instead, she saw a small round table by the wall, one chair, one plate, one glass alone. Her smile faded, but she said nothing. Weddings were busy, mistakes happened. She walked slowly across the room, every step feeling heavier than the last. Conversations lowered as she passed. She imagined what people saw. Single woman, no partner, dressed too carefully, sitting where no one else wanted to sit. Emily pulled out the chair and sat down, forcing herself to breathe. She looked around again, hoping she had misunderstood. But every other table was full. Parents, cousins, friends, even distant relatives had company. Only her table stood apart, like an afterthought. From her seat, she could see the front clearly. The family table was close to the stage, beautifully decorated. There were seats for her father, her aunt, her cousins, or was even an empty chair, but her name was not there. That was when the truth settled in. This was not an accident. Emily felt a quiet ache spread through her chest, slow and steady. She remembered when Sarah, her younger sister, was born. Emily had been 12. She remembered holding that tiny hand, promising herself she would always protect her. After their mother passed away, Emily stepped into a role she never asked for: helper, guide, steady presence. She skipped parties to help with homework. She worked extra hours to help with tuition. She listened to heartbreaks and dreams always, putting Sarah first. And now, on the biggest day of Sarah's life, Emily was sitting alone. The ceremony music began, pulling Emily back to the present. Everyone stood. Emily stood too, smoothing her dress again, as if she could smooth away the feeling inside her. Sarah appeared at the entrance, glowing in white, eyes shining with excitement. The room filled with admiration. Emily felt proud, deeply proud. But Sarah never looked her way. Emily clapped when everyone else did. She smiled when everyone else smiled. But something inside her cracked each time Sarah thanked friends, planners, and everyone who made this day possible. Emily didn't need public thanks. She only wanted acknowledgement. One glance, one sign that she still mattered. When the ceremony ended, guests returned to their seats. Emily sat again at her small table, surrounded by noise, yet wrapped in silence. Servers began placing plates down. Emily barely noticed the food. She told herself not to overthink it. Maybe Sarah assumed she'd sit with cousins. Maybe someone else had moved seats. But as minutes passed, no one came. No correction, no explanation. Then a shadow fell across the table. "Excuse me," a calm voice said. "Is someone sitting?" Here, Emily looked up. The man standing there seemed just as unsure as she felt. Mid-30s, dark hair, kind eyes. His tie was loosened slightly, like he had stopped caring about perfection halfway through the night. "No," Emily said honestly, "it's just me." He smiled, relieved. "Good." Because I was about to feel very awkward standing here with a plate and no plan. Emily let out a small laugh, surprised by herself. I'm Daniel, right? He said, pulling out the chair across from her. Apparently, I'm seated at the table of forgotten people. Emily nodded. Seems we have that in common? As he sat down, the space between them felt easier. Not forced, not heavy, just human. They exchanged simple details. Daniel was a co-worker of the groom, not very close, invited late. Emily was the bride's sister. Daniel raised his eyebrows slightly at that, but said nothing. For the first time that evening, Emily felt seen not as an extra, not as a problem, but as a person. They talked as the dinner continued. Light at first, safe topics. Then, slowly, carefully, Emily shared a little truth. How she and her sister hadn't been as close lately. How weddings brought pressure. How expectations could quietly push people apart. Daniel listened without trying to fix anything. I think, he said gently, sometimes people get so focused on how things look that they forget how things feel. Emily nodded, staring at her glass. I just didn't expect to feel invisible today. Across the room, laughter grew louder. Music shifted to a happier tone. People stood to dance. From where Emily sat, she could see Sarah laughing with friends, her new husband's hand around her waist. She looked happy, and that mattered. Still, Emily wondered when she had stopped being part of that happiness. Daniel noticed her distant. Look, you okay? Emily hesitated, then said, I thought today would remind me I belong. Instead, it's reminding me how easy it is to be pushed aside. Daniel didn't respond right away. Then he said, You don't seem like someone who disappears easily. Emily smiled at that, though her eyes felt warm. As the night went on, Emily realized something unexpected. Sitting alone had hurt, but meeting Daniel had softened the edges of that pain. There was comfort in being understood without explanation. Then, just as Emily began to relax, she felt it. A shift. She looked up. Sarah had turned around from the dance floor. Her eyes moved across the room, laughing, then slowing. Confusion crossed her face as she noticed Emily's table. Sarah's smile faded. Emily's heart beat faster. She didn't wave. She didn't stand. She simply watched. Across the room, Sarah stared at the empty chair beside her at the family table, and for the first time that night, Emily knew this story was not finished yet. The music changed, soft and slow, filling the room with a gentle rhythm. Emily Carter felt the tension in her shoulders ease just slightly as Daniel Wright offered a small, understanding smile. She had spent the evening feeling invisible, abandoned, at the edge of the celebration, but now, sitting across from someone who actually listened, the loneliness didn't feel quite so heavy. Daniel's calm presence reminded her that sometimes connections could appear in the most unexpected places. Even on a day meant to spotlight someone else, she spoke quietly. Unsure if anyone else would hear about the weight of being overlooked. I've always been the one who held things together, she said. It's like everyone assumes I can handle it, that I'll always be there. So no one notices when I need someone too. Daniel nodded, leaning slightly forward as though he understood every word without judgment. I get it, he replied. Softly, people often forget that the strong ones have feelings too. Weddings just make it obvious. You see everything, the joy, the family, the attention, and sometimes it's a reminder of what you're missing. Emily's lips curved into a faint, grateful smile. Daniel wasn't just filling her empty chair. He was giving her a voice she hadn't had all night. For the first time, she stopped counting empty seats and started noticing someone willing to share this strange, bittersweet moment with her. They laughed quietly at small jokes, trading stories about awkward wedding experiences they'd both had before. The conversation flowed naturally, carrying a warmth Emily hadn't expected. Meanwhile, across the room, Sarah Carter's laughter faltered. Her eyes had caught Emily sitting apart, talking to a stranger she didn't recognize. Something in Sarah's chest tightened as she realized the distance she had created, not just physically, but emotionally. She had spent months planning every detail of her wedding, trying to craft the perfect day, and in doing so, she had failed to see her sister's quiet disappointment. Now, seeing Emily with someone else, seemingly content, Sarah felt a pang of guilt. Unable to ignore it, Sarah leaned toward her husband, whispering something that made him nod. She stepped carefully through the crowd, weaving past dancing couples and laughing relatives. Emily's focus remained on Daniel until a soft voice called her name, Em. Emily froze. Slowly, she turned her head. Sarah was standing there, looking hesitant, uncertain, and uncharacteristically vulnerable. Emily's heart beat faster, a mix of frustration and hope rising together. She didn't stand immediately. She wanted Sarah to see her, really see her, without excuses, without the gloss of the wedding day masking their history. "Why are you back here?" Sarah asked, her voice quiet, almost apologetic. Emily's eyes met her sister's. "You tell me," she said simply, her voice steady despite the emotion swelling inside. A pause stretched between them, charged with unspoken words and years of shared memories. Finally, Sarah spoke, her tone softening. "I thought if I didn't seat you with everyone else, you wouldn't feel responsible. You've always carried more than your share, Em. I wanted today to be mine, just mine." Without that weight, Emily's chest tightened. "You didn't have to push me away to do that," she said, her voice shaking only slightly. "I could have handled it." Sarah's eyes shimmered with unshed tears. "I know. I misjudged it," she admitted. "I'm sorry. I didn't realize how it would feel for you." The tension between them began to soften, a fragile thread of understanding weaving through the air. Emily nodded slowly, absorbing the apology and the sincerity behind it. She had expected anger or excuses, but instead, she found a sister willing to admit a mistake. Daniel, sensing the emotional shift, gave Emily's hand a gentle squeeze of reassurance. "You're okay," he said quietly. "She sees you now." Emily took a deep breath and smiled faintly at Daniel. His presence had been a lifeline tonight, a reminder that connection didn't always have to be perfect or expected. Sometimes it appeared quietly, patiently, in a corner where no one else thought to look. Sarah's gaze softened further. I hope you know how much you mean to me," she said. "I didn't show it the way I should have, but you've always been the heart of this family." Emily felt a lump rise in her throat. For years, she had given everything silently, and now, finally, it was acknowledged. She reached out, taking her sister's hands. "I know," she whispered. "I've always known. But it still hurts when I feel forgotten." Sarah nodded, squeezing her hands in return. "I'll never forget again, I promise." For a moment they simply stood there, connected by something stronger than the party, the music, or the wedding itself. It was a rare, quiet moment of honesty in the midst of celebration, a reminder that even in the most chaotic times, relationships could be repaired. Then Sarah glanced at Daniel, who had been patiently waiting, a supportive smile on his face. Emily's eyes followed hers, and she realized something simple but profound. Tonight had been about more than the wedding. It had been about finding her own place, even when she felt overlooked. And now, with Daniel beside her, that place felt less lonely. "Would you like to dance?" Daniel asked, holding out his hand with a quiet confidence. Emily hesitated only for a second. She looked at Sarah, who nodded encouragingly, then back at Daniel. The ballroom lights reflected off the polished floor, soft music swirling around them, creating a private world amidst the celebration. Emily took his hand, letting him guide her to the dance floor. They moved slowly, naturally, in rhythm with the gentle music. Emily's mind cleared of the earlier sting of isolation. Each step, each turn felt like a small reclaiming of her evening and her sense of self. Daniel didn't try to fill the space with words or force conversation, simply existed alongside, her steady and patient, making her feel visible in a way she hadn't expected as they swayed. Emily glanced across the room at Sarah, who was smiling with relief. The sisters shared a small, knowing look, an unspoken acknowledgement that something had shifted. The day had started with tension and unspoken hurt, but now there was clarity, forgiveness, and a quiet promise that they could rebuild the bond that had been strained by years of unspoken expectations. The song ended, but Emily didn't feel the need to step away. Daniel's hand remained in hers, a subtle invitation to linger in this new chapter of connection and understanding. She realized that being forced to sit alone had not been a punishment. It had been a space that allowed her to discover something. Unexpected friendship, understanding, and perhaps the beginning of a deeper bond. Around them, the wedding continued. Laughter and music filled the air. Couples danced and the celebration carried on. But for Emily, the world had narrowed to the small, meaningful presence of Daniel and the restored connection with her sister. She felt gratitude for the twists of fate that had led her here, for the uncomfortable, lonely moments that had made this evening's emotional clarity possible. Emily finally allowed herself to breathe fully, letting the warmth of the room and the sincerity of the people around her wash over her. She understood now that family and connection were not always perfect. And sometimes the most meaningful bonds emerged when least expected. Sitting alone had revealed her strength, her capacity for forgiveness, and her ability to open herself. Two new, genuine connections dot as the night drew to a close. Emily found herself standing beside Sarah, Daniel walking just behind them. She looked around the room and noticed the subtle details she had missed before, the way guests laughed genuinely, the soft glow of lights, the way the music carried emotions without words. The wedding had been a catalyst, a stage upon which old misunderstandings and unspoken feelings could finally be addressed. Emily realized something important. The empty chair had not been a place of rejection, but an invitation. It had forced her to confront feelings she had buried, to engage with a stranger who would become an ally, and to reclaim her sense of worth and belonging. She had entered the night feeling invisible and overlooked. She left it with a renewed sense of self, a strengthened bond with her sister, and the first sparks of a connection that might lead to something meaningful with Daniel. And as the last guests left, as the music slowed and the lights dimmed, Emily understood the truth she had felt all along. Being alone for a moment did not mean being unwanted. Sometimes it meant creating space for growth, for clarity, and for the beginnings of something beautiful. She had not just survived the night, she had emerged stronger, seen, and unexpectedly hopeful. Emily smiled quietly to herself, feeling a calm certainty she hadn't experienced in a long time. The wedding had ended, but the story was far from over. Tonight had been a reminder that love, understanding, and connection could appear in unexpected places, and that sometimes the smallest moments, an empty chair, a stranger's kindness, a sister's apology, could change everything. And with that thought, Emily stepped forward, ready to embrace whatever came next, knowing that for the first time in a long time, she truly belonged.